Welcome back to another Web Dev Podcast episode where we help aspiring developers get jobs and junior developers grow. If you haven't seen it already, we actually reviewed Nucamp. So if you're considering going to Nucamp in 2023, I brought on 3 real graduates to share their real experiences. And Ludo decided to reach out. He wanted to hop on and talk about how the episode went and kind of just dive into some, details, give us a scoop. What's actually happening with Nucamp. So, Ludo, we've had you on before. I appreciate you coming on again. But how have you been, man?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me. It's a throwback from, I think, 2 years ago when we did it the first time around. And it was pretty interesting, pretty fun to do. So why not the second time?
Yeah, I think it's fun. I wish more CEOs were willing to do this and come on and put themselves out there like this. So I do appreciate it. So, yeah, we did the review. What do you think of it?
Very fair. It's always really interesting how balanced your reviews are and how you're getting really, I think, the audience to share a ton of information about their experience and how, in the end, it's actually quite a good reflection of what we're trying to accomplish. Sometimes there's miscommunication and things that you catch or that I catch that are like, oh, I wish they knew that, or I wish they said that, or I can bring a little bit more color behind this decision, which I think was really why we talked last 2 years ago. But yeah, I mean, it's I have to say, it's always, the right people in a sense that, they're not completely on one end of the spectrum or the other, right? They're very balanced in their views and very articulate in how they're expressing themselves. And for me, it's always a source of insights into, okay, what works, what doesn't, what should we change? So, and I sent you, my list of things right after watching the podcast. Was like, oh, geez, there's all those things that we could be talking about. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. If you want me to go into that, or if you have one in particular that you would like to pull, let me know.
Yeah, I want to know what's interesting to you. What kind of really stood out to you in the episode that you want to talk about? Anything that you want to clear up, or like you said, you took it as feedback, which I think is a very healthy thing to do with these episodes. So I'll let you take it away. What do you want to dive into first?
Yeah, I think what was interesting, if there was not one major thing that made me think, oh my God, that this one thing is so broken, or this one thing is really amazing. I think there was a lot of little things that were comforting our decision or kind of like, well, yeah, we really have to address that. One thing actually I will start with is, I think when you recorded those interviews, we had just announced that we were replacing Bootstrap. We were teaching Bootstrap for 5 weeks for a 5 week of JavaScript. And that was for a full stack. So we had just announced it. And I think your guest kind of mentioned it, but hadn't experienced it yet. This is students right now, if you look at the timestamp, students right now are actually experiencing our 5 week JavaScript. And this was very much in response to previous feedback where students were really starting React without enough JavaScript background. Now, we were giving them JavaScript within Bootstrap and before that, but there wasn't really a cohesive full 5 weeks of, learning just vanilla JavaScript. And so I think that was mentioned a few times during the podcast. And so the good news is it's live, and we're getting pretty good feedback right now. So we're pretty happy about that. But that was one thing that was pretty cool to hear your guests talk about, even though they didn't know it was actually happening when the podcast released.
Yeah. So you're actually getting rid of the Bootstrap.
So we're not getting rid of it completely. And if you go back, Bootstrap for me was very much a confidence boost for students very early on, where you can really build things very quickly, and it really encourages you to continue. It really, create a confidence boost at the very beginning where you're like, well, I can do this. And so we're actually, the way we had it structured, we had 4 weeks of introduction to web development that were HTML, CSS, and then just 2 weeks of JavaScript. and then we had more JavaScript weeks in Bootstrap, and then at the beginning of React. We've actually trimmed down Bootstrap to 2 weeks, and now we're doing HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap. And then 5 weeks of JavaScript. I think I know what you're going to say about CSS and Bootstrap together, so I'll let you say it. Like,
what am I going to say?
How deep are we going in CSS?
Exactly.
Yeah,
we've had this conversation a few times.
We're not going super deep in CSS, and we're introducing Bootstrap very fast versus going very deep in your Flexbox and all that. And there's merit in either path. And it's true that if you just do CSS and you just really go very deep in it, you'll actually know how to handle any framework, UI framework that is thrown at you. For me, there's still what I really like about Bootstrap is it's very easy to present responsiveness and mobile development to folks. They understand grids, they understand responsiveness without necessarily getting into media queries. And there's also, to be honest, it's really hard to throw away investment that you're making in a curriculum and just replace it with something brand new. And so we had really good content around Bootstrap, and what's the best use of it when we really want to make a highlight of JavaScript. Well, the best use of it is really to bringing into a smaller bootcamp the 4-week introduction, so that we can give a flavor of what HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap can be. So that's very much the state of things right now.
I agree with you, and you actually changed my mind with the Bootstrap thing. I think it's a nice exposure, and it allows people, and this is why I think most people like front end, they get that feedback quickly. It's a little bit of a different feeling on the back end, and everyone's going to have their preferences, but using Bootstrap to help get that feedback a little bit more quickly, give people ownership over being able to change what's in front of them and build actual web pages when they might have put that in a pedestal and before they even thought of the career. I think that's actually fairly effective. And my gripe, especially with your program, is very weak in CSS, right? And it dives too far into Bootstrap. And so my concern becomes more of a concern just because the market is rougher. And people have to figure out how they are going to stand out. And so talking to different hiring managers, they all have their different preferences. But for front end specifically, it's still very common for hiring managers to prioritize JavaScript. So I'm glad that you are doing that. That is a strong move. But there are hiring managers that have shared with me that almost no one knows CSS coming in, and they've actually picked people that have taken the time to do that will bring that onto the team and will enjoy it, because some developers just hate CSS too. And that's something you're going to have to work with on the front end. So I'm still a little bit concerned of how deep you're really diving into CSS. And I'm hoping down the road, because like you said, when you replace something, it takes time. You pretty much had that Bootstrap section down, and it's probably going to take time, even with this new 5-week JavaScript thing, to really get this solid. But do you have any plans to supplement CSS a bit more?
Not at this time. So what we still have is that connective tissue with Bootstrap. So even though it's not 5 weeks anymore, we teach it so we do 1 week of CSS, which is not a lot. I mean, definitely not a lot, right? It's vanilla CSS, right? Then it's Bootstrap, where we introduce responsiveness, grid. So everything you could think of that you would learn in CSS around Flexbox is more Bootstrap. And then we pick that up with React, React Strap or React Bootstrap. I can't remember exactly the library. So there is a connective tissue here. I would say, in all fairness, the front-end bootcamp is deeper in JavaScript React now. So really it's very much deeper in JavaScript and React than it is in pure CSS. And so definitely something that students will have to, continue to practice and start to explore on their own. But now, it's very much 5 weeks JavaScript, 5-week React. And then we have still, if we want to go there, the 4-week React Native to add, again, that mobile responsiveness and also, mobile app development there. And I know some of the students were not very fan of that. I was thinking about, that choice of still teaching React Native, and I was wondering if I will actually die on that hill or not, and maybe I will.
What are your thoughts around that?
I think it's super important for developer to have a mobile first mindset, and you can get it just by using a mobile first, UI framework, although they're all. But 80% of any web traffic comes from a mobile device. So I'm not really thinking about React Native as a Apple Store or Google Play Store, app enabler. That's cherry on top. I'm really more thinking about it as, well, now really think about what your building looks like on a mobile device. And that really forces students to think through those lenses for 4 weeks and use actually framework elements that are optimized for web UI. Like you swipe, you have pop-ups that are very much mobile optimized. You have, hamburgers menus. You have responsiveness that is different. You have, mobile widgets that are very much optimized for mobile display. My personal philosophy is every website should be a mobile website first. And I would encourage any aspiring developer, when they do it, when you debug, and you actually, most of the time you're going to debug with a developer console, and you're going to still debug a website, like, landscape type of view. Force yourself to debug while actually, using a device emulator in Chrome. And you'll find bugs everywhere the first time you do it. So that's kind of the mindset here is, first you reinforce React. So ultimately, it's not just 5 weeks of React, it's 9. But you also kind of really impress on students the importance of web design or mobile responsive design, even on the web. So it's kind of where I stand on that.
I get that. That's an interesting concept. So the priority isn't really to learn React Native to build mobile apps. It's to really instill the mindset to be a mobile first developer.
Yeah.
And so, thinking back from different feedback that I've heard, even from instructors, the React Native can potentially supplement the React knowledge a bit. It's different. It has similarities, but really, you can truly understand React well by going into it with a strong foundation with JavaScript. I found that is it consistently helps students truly understand React well. I've talked about this example of I built a virtual DOM and kind of state management with jQuery before we even dove into React, and it helped me understand what was happening under the hood. And that was a technique. It might not work for every student, but I find that really understanding that, this is an abstraction. There are things happening, and these things happening under the hood might be causing some of the bugs. You're going to get weird, obscure things. And, having a solid foundation of JavaScript will help you navigate a lot of different frameworks. Just like you said, learning CSS, you'll pretty much be able to pick up other CSS frameworks pretty easily. But you're already introducing this 5-week program that's additional JavaScript, which I think is going to help with the React. So I don't think the React Native, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's not as needed to supplement the React portion. But if you are adding the JavaScript portion, but for the React portion, hold on, I just spaced out. Give me a second.
I think, no, but I can pick up where you're going, I think.
Where am I going?
I think you're going and switching React Native to a CSS framework, and we're doubling down on CSS with mobile views.
Okay, I don't know how I just I literally lost that thought for some reason, and you picked it. I don't know how that happened, but scratch the CSS framework, replace it with vanilla CSS, and force them to build mobile only. Don't even allow them to do desktop.
Yeah. So if we had infinite budget, infinite resources, maybe not infinite, but we could actually do something like that. I think that will achieve a lot of things. And one thing that students are, complaining about with React Native is it's very cumbersome to set up, because you do have to use Expo. You do have to emulate an actual device. And there's benefit in that, there's learning, and it's interesting to learn that, and you may actually use that skill. But it is painful. It is painful. And there's no good way to work around it, right? Pretty much you're asking to have a laptop or computer that can do emulation of, third-party hardware. And in this case, it's a phone, but it's pretty much you're running an emulator on your machine, which is huge. Typically, it's complicated. So, but yeah, I think you're right. I mean, if we were to rethink the whole thing again, there will be value in swapping React Native with something that's purely focused on CSS or CSS-like. I think I may still want to introduce, a very modern framework for CSS, maybe not Bootstrap, and then really just teach students to build a mobile app, a mobile website with a very significant emphasis on just the CSS framework or the CSS Flexbox and grid. What you will miss, though, that's why I still think a framework is important here. There's a ton of different widgets that you will typically use when you think mobile. And you will spend a ton of time, and it's not worth it to actually rebuild those widgets in pure CSS. It will be very expensive to rebuild a swiper. It will be and you see what I mean? It's like there's a ton of things that you expect on a mobile experience that you really don't want to recreate just using pure CSS. You just want to pick one that just exists out there. The concept of
But it depends on the goal. If you're learning, that's how you're going to learn CSS. You're going to build through practical widgets. I think widgets are like a condensed form enough where you don't have a full project that's going to be overwhelming. But if you have a widget in mind, like that's a great goal to build a widget that you already, like you could rebuild a Bootstrap widget. And so you already have the requirements. Yeah. But now you just have to focus on the syntax and that translates.
Actually, you're right. And it connects me with something that students actually hate, but you want to do it as an educator. So you want to tell the students, hey, build a card using, traditional divs, and the card header, the card image, the card title. And you want to teach them to do that pure CSS. And then the lesson afterwards, you're going to say, well, guess what? Scratch all that. That thing already exists. It's out there. And students hate that. I can't tell you how many times we are seeing students saying, why did you just tell me to build something from scratch? And then write the next lesson, tell me to scratch it all together and replace it with something that exists. And that's fine. It's just interesting, but that's how you teach people. You're right. You're teaching them, just like your example of learning jQuery, using jQuery and then switching to React. Yeah.
And I think a lot of students, and you probably have to face this all the time, they have these preconceived notions of how they're supposed to become a software engineer, how their learning journey is supposed to go. And you're probably combating that every step of the way.
I've always felt unease with the statement, follow the process, trust the process, sorry. Because it feels like you're telling students to, be blind to whatever happens to them and their experience. But there's some truth to that. And I think you say it also very often. As a student, when you're committed to a coding bootcamp and the experience that they're giving you, you want to trust it as much as you can, because you don't want to second guess everything they're doing and how they're doing it, because it's going to get in the way of you learning what you're supposed to learn. It's not that often. We do see students, and often it's students that actually have a background in education, like they were a teacher before, or they have built courses themselves, and their feedback will be, you should not do it this way, you should do it that way. And sometimes it's true. Sometimes the feedback is well taken, but sometimes they're missing a point. But it gets in the way. At the end of the day, it gets in their way of, just absorbing the material. And I mean, it doesn't hurt to get the feedback, obviously, and we'll listen to it. But yeah, it's not always the best use of their time.
Yeah. Yeah. In my live streams, I don't have to sugarcoat it when I'm providing expectations. And that's what you're essentially having to do. I think it's a fantastic way. I like anyone even listening, I highly encourage you to build the building blocks first and understand them. Like I'm do it harder first. I know it might sound counterintuitive. It might, but it's what I see. And the problem, like really why I emphasize this, so many aspiring developers have no foundations. They are lost without React. They are lost without a CSS framework. And you have so many people applying for these positions that, like, honestly, if you just really, truly understood the foundational concepts, you're going to be much more accepted. They're going to be willing to ramp you up with foundational concepts rather than, like, let's say they're a React shop, right? And Vue, but you really suck with JavaScript. I would argue companies are probably going to take someone that's really good with JavaScript, hasn't even used a framework yet, versus someone that knows Vue and basically just horrible with JavaScript, right? Because I feel like the foundational concepts take so long to build up. It takes time, takes a lot of implementation. And it's just, these foundational concepts are lacking. And I think you can really build, like just solidify them in your brain by doing the hard stuff first, doing the building blocks first. Stop going with the easy routes all the time to get these features up. You could do it for exposure initially, but this is the big hole I see in many developers I talk to that are trying to land in the industry, especially now. Their foundations just suck. And we got to how do we fix this? And that's really the problem.
And maybe we're going to spend too much time on CSS, but I agree with you for JavaScript. Anything that's programming language, I agree with you. HTML, I think you have to understand HTML. It's so simple and so basic. If you don't understand HTML, you're going to get nowhere. Two things. The world of technology is all about adding abstractions on top of abstractions and making it easier and more powerful to do things. So at some point, and you kind of see that with TypeScript versus JavaScript, although I don't think it's fair to say it's an abstraction evolution. But you're seeing people slowly maybe moving away from JavaScript to higher degree languages like TypeScript. CSS is so peculiar in the way that it's not a programming language. We don't know really what it is. It's kind of weird. Everybody hates it. And
Not
if there's one thing that okay, 90% of the
is that what
I got used to it. I got used to it. But at the very beginning, it's a pain. It's real pain to learn because you never understand what's happening there. You never understand, exclamation point important. Come on, really? Like, how do you actually, what does that make sense really to you that you can override anything by exclamation point important? It's something that begs to be abstracted. And I think there's starting to be really good languages, or not languages, but frameworks that actually do that. And I think the future of CSS is really to be abstracted and then forgotten about, to be honest with you. Of course, someone who knows C++ right now or C will always have a leg up on its understanding of everything else. But I think it's going to be rarer and rarer for people to have to really learn CSS the way it is. I keep trying to remember that CSS framework that's the most popular right now. Starts with a T. Help me.
Tailwind?
Tailwind. Everybody who started Tailwind fell in love with Tailwind. How come I will never go back to CSS pretty much. And it's great for, cross-team collaboration because everybody's on the same page in terms of what it means. I think the future is to be way less and less dependent on pure CSS and way more on, abstraction framework that make people happier in building stuff in the end.
But how far into the future?
I don't think it's that far. I think more and more people are going to ask for Tailwind or frameworks like that. When you look at repos, when you look at people, on Twitter or X, talking about their new project, they're going to mention the CSS framework they use. Very rarely are they going to say pure CSS. I think it's 2 years out, 2-3 years out. I think it's going to be gradual. It's going to be a few percentage points, I guess, every year. But I think less and less people are going to rely on CSS experts and more Tailwind experts.
Assuming Tailwind maintains its popularity, which I think it's kind of... I need to look at more data, but it feels like it's over the hill. Like, it still feels popular, but it feels like it spiked with that popularity, and it's moving on with that. And I see different companies, if they do use a CSS library, I don't think majority of them actually use Tailwind. And so that's kind of the problem. It's like, if you learned a certain framework, like if you just know CSS, you're going to be able to pick up any CSS framework very, very easily. I guess, like, you might be right in your estimation that CSS we're going to create some abstraction of it. That might be a thing. But you mentioned like 2 to 3 years out. What about the next year? What about the next 6 months?
And I guess you're bringing it back to, graduates being on the job market, applying for jobs. So there's, we do teach CSS, not to great extent, but we do spend more time on Bootstrap, and then way more time on just the foundation of JavaScript, and as we just said, right? So it's going to be very much, looking for those positions that are really looking for those type of skills: JavaScript, React Native. There's actually a nice niche market there, and actually people can get jobs there. And then if there's really a huge need in very deep CSS skills, it's not too hard to pick up, in a sense. Like, it doesn't have all the logics. It's not a algorithm, and you're not going to get a algorithm and data structure test on it. It's not going to be that difficult. So definitely we'll need to supplement in that space. I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
Okay.
But I think that's where we are. And I think, to go back to the point, I think what's missing today is a new standard. Just like, there's new JavaScript standards every year. There's new HTML standards. There isn't really besides SCSS, there hasn't been a new framework standard for CSS, in a sense, right? If Tailwind, for example, was to get a standard level of abstraction, then adoption will be crazy fast. I guess that's just me thinking out loud.
What makes JavaScript have a standard that CSS doesn't?
ECMA. There's actually a .org. There's actually a group of technical experts that...
CSS doesn't have that?
No, I don't think so. Maybe CSS 1.2 was the latest one. Maybe they do actually. They probably do, but do you know? Do you know about them? Like, what do they do? What is the latest release of CSS?
2.1. I don't know, level. I wouldn't know the number, but I know they have like revisions, and I've taken a look at like some notes that they were adding. But I genuinely think in the programming, I don't know if this is accurate to say. I feel like a lot of people just hate CSS, like you said, and I think there are standards, and I think there are even levels that you can aim for that are going to make you fairly marketable in terms of what most jobs are looking for. I just think no one wants to talk about it. Everyone literally just wants to shit on CSS, and it's going to get replaced, and maybe that'll happen. But I get this general impression that like the programming community just hates CSS, and so it's like any message possible to just like trash it. And it's like, I don't care if you like it or don't. I just want you to be prepared for the position, because CSS comes easily to you. I think it takes some ramp up time. CSS is annoying to learn.
Oh yeah, no. It comes easily after a few years. Let's be clear. Yeah. But it's I don't know. Yeah, I guess everyone is expected to struggle with CSS. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, and just because I want to get to some other questions, I think.
We need to move on. You're right.
But the point to solidify, I agree with the focus on JavaScript. I think all coding bootcamp should be doing that over CSS. So you also, so it kind of seems like your instructors, it's kind of a hit or a miss.
Yeah. So yes and no. So we have a very low turnaround. We have a low turnover. Sorry, yeah, we have a very low turnover of instructors, but it's about 5%, I will say. We do try to bring new instructors on a regular basis, because what we see happening sometimes is a good instructor can over time become less good. It's a side job for them. Although I want to just mention something that not a lot of people know. Even though they are part-time with us, we just made them employees of Nucamp since January 1st this year. And so we're paying, all the social security taxes, and they get employment benefits when they don't work for us. So we're pretty happy with that. So they were contractors before, now they're actual employees. So that's a good thing. But what we see, even with the best instructors that we have, after, if they teach every month for about 5 months or 6 months, since we're asking them to work on weekends as well, we have that 4-hour workshop, it can be very tiring. So we're trying to bring new instructors to help. And when we bring a new instructor, there's going to be a HR interview and a tech interview. And then that instructor is going to shadow another instructor first, and then that instructor is going to teach. And it could go well or it could not go well. And if it doesn't go well, then we actually remove the instructor and we bring a more experienced one. And so there's always a flux like that. But overall, so you could actually end up with an instructor that maybe is just starting and hasn't been, it's just his first class. And actually we give them an opportunity to try again and teach a second class. But overall, our minimum bar for an instructor rating is 4.2 out of 5. And our average for every instructor, every class for this year is 4.75, I think. So you're way more likely to have a great experience with an instructor than you are to not have a good experience with an instructor. But it can happen. It can happen. We have, at any point in time, we have 150 instructors teaching, and we're monitoring what they're doing on a weekly basis. But yeah, it could happen. That's very human. And as I said, we bring new people on an ongoing basis. And sometimes some instructors who are really great may have a bad week and not be so great. I think what I really appreciated in hearing students say is how they were seeing our efforts to address that. So that can happen, definitely it can happen, but we have systems in place to identify when it happens. And we actually take action immediately. So 4.2 is the minimum. If you're below 4.0, we're going to replace you. 4.0 to 4.2, we're going to work with you to make you better. But below 4.0, you're not going to teach again with us. So yeah, that's pretty much what's going on. Overall, our instructors, so they're part-time with us and full-time in the industry. They're going to be with their students online using Discord or learning management system, private messaging during the week. And then they're going to teach, or they're not really teaching. They're more, think of them more as a teaching assistant, because they're not lecturing. The lecturing is done through our platform. They're going to do some lecturing at the beginning on Saturdays or Sundays, but that's more to recap the week's worth of learning. And then they're helping students work on assignments. It's really very much hands-on. We don't give you the solution. You have to figure it out on your own. And then they're grading you by the Wednesday the week after, and it's a 1 to 10 grade. So yeah, that's pretty much what they're doing right now.
Okay. I think that's fair. I didn't realize you had so many instructors. Do you have a head instructor or someone to manage all of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We have HR person and the head and the instructor manager that handles the scheduling, that handles the quality feedback, the coaching. We have instructor coaches as well So the people that have stayed with us for like 2 or 3 years, we are helping other instructors come on board. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Okay. Yeah, I mean, you said 5% turnover, but you just have a lot of instructors. You try someone new and, students are bound to get a bad instructor. That'll happen. But I like the system in place to be able to handle that.
That's right.
Okay. So I've always had an issue with your program with who you let in. I think a lot of people go into your program not prepared.
Yeah. So, and I know you have seen your posts. You put a lot of value in selection at the beginning, at the entry of the bootcamp, and I have a completely different view on that. So first, for me, our selection process is our 4-week web development fundamentals. That is not mandatory though. So if you pass a test, you can still get in. But I think if you step back, here's how I kind of view the world. And it's very much based on my personal experience in France when I went to college. We're giving, I don't like the approach of removing an opportunity to a student based on a test, like a one shot, you are in or you're out because you succeeded or failed on that test. I think it's reducing the ability of someone to persevere. It's reducing the ability of someone to be better, and just to prove themselves, kind of quote unquote, on the job, even though it's not on the job, it's as learners. So that's a reduction of what someone can become and can achieve. And there is actually a word for that for me in terms of what we have implemented. And many people are going to not like it, but it's actually the way it works. It's a little bit the survival of the fittest, in a sense that we're giving them all the tools to be successful, and we're removing all the obstacles. We're removing the financial obstacle. They don't have to quit their job. So we're removing the risks, and we're giving them all the tools to be successful. And now we're trusting them to commit themselves and to take advantage of that. And them being capable of doing that is their own ability to do it. It's not us telling them, well, you didn't pass that test, therefore you're not qualified to come with us. And they're not competing with others. They're not competing with their, classmates. They're competing with themselves, in a sense, and themselves and their environment. They're going to compete with, a family that's asking for them. They're competing with, a job that's maybe very demanding, or life that happens. But I prefer that approach of letting everyone who has a shot at it to prove to themselves they can do it, versus us arbitrarily saying, sorry, you didn't answer right to that question, and we didn't really like this answer, therefore you're not gonna join us. And I said it's kind of based on my own experience, because in France, education is free, so everyone can get in as long as you have a good enough GPA, I will say. And what ends up happening is, you waste your first year doing nothing because you're young and a little bit, you just found freedom. You're not with your parents anymore. But that's pretty much on you. It's all on you. It's like you have everything at your disposal.
But that GPA
education is free.
Something that weeds people out.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is. But 80% of students' population in France is accepted to college for free, pretty much. That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that number was maybe 20 years ago, and now actually I think it's much higher. Actually, that's what I've heard. But I think that's and of course we couldn't do free. Actually, I don't think education should be 100% free, because then you don't have the right motivation in place or the right incentive. But I think this is a little bit what I've tried to reproduce here. It's giving everyone a quality experience with the right support, and then really trusting the adult in the room our students that they're going to, apply themselves, that they're going to make all the right decisions during that time. And we're going to be there for them for that.
Okay. I get where you're coming from with that. So I want to hear your thoughts on my mindset with this. Mm-hmm. You use the word removing the student from basically reaching their potential. You're basically arbitrarily telling them, no, this opportunity isn't for you. And so I want to revise that. When you have a high bar to get in, you're saying, no, this opportunity isn't for you right now because we're not going to be able to deliver the amount of value that's going to be worth what you are paying for now. And I think there is a lot of value in getting people primed, especially like coming from traditional education. Software engineering is weird. Learning it is weird. It's not memorization. And I think even just training yourself, even just saying like, hey, we actually have a course for you way cheaper, right? We're going to give it to you for very cheap. We want to see you do, and it is mandatory, or you have to take the test. But essentially it's like, you gotta show us that you want this. You gotta show us that you are going to be able to complete this, and it's going to help with dropout rates for sure. But my concern is when you are still charging thousands for students to get in, a lot of students, even if they make it to the end, even graduation rates aren't that important. More so of like what they've actually retained and the depth of knowledge that they have coming out of the program. I think that can be severely increased by telling people, hey, software engineering isn't this incredibly easy thing to get into, but we're going to set up a system that allows you to ease yourself into it, prime yourself. You're going to get the most value possible from our program because we're going to make sure that you're ready for it. It's not saying this opportunity isn't for you. It's saying, you know what? Here's a self-taught path for 3 months, or here's a course we're going to offer for way cheaper for 3 months. Let's truly get you primed. And when you make it optional, like a lot of people don't even understand what it takes to become a software engineer now. So when you say like, oh, we're going to treat them like adults. Yeah, I'm not saying treat them like children, but you probably understand how hard it is to become a software engineer and how much you have to learn. And like software engineering challenges all of your habits. And you think you have your habits down, but it's like that motivation is going to die. You are going to feel stupid. You're going to feel all sorts of emotions that you aren't necessarily prepared for. Let's give these students a portion of time where it's kind of just a miniature version of the course. Let's make sure they really have this down. Then they're going to get all of that value that they paid for with your main program.
Yeah. All right. So that's cool. A few things here. First is, in my mind today, that priming is that 4-week experience. That has a price to it, but it's for $450 something.
That is optional.
But I think that is optional. But if you really want to, and we truly, anytime we have an interaction with someone saying, hey, I don't know what I should do, we say, hey, and we tell them, hey, you should learn on your own for 6 months, like test yourself, plenty of stuff out there. Then do the web development fundamentals for 4 weeks. And we actually tell them it's for 3 things. You're going to know if it's for you, you're going to know if you like it, and you're going to know if Nucamp is for you, like maybe we're not the right way for you to learn. But that being said, we're planning something, and I want to know your thoughts, and I actually want to know the audience thoughts, if that's a good idea and if they would enjoy it. We're actually planning to do exactly what you just described. We're planning to publish a free course that will be a primer that will actually mimic our experience with an instructor and a workshop, etc. And we're actually planning to produce the Eloquent JavaScript book into a course. Make it available for free and encouraging students to actually start there as well. Instead of saying, learn on your own for 6 months, try this course that mimics the Nucamp experience, but it's an actual course. And that's really kind of even more fundamentals than our 5 weeks JavaScript. So I'd love to know your thoughts on that. And what the audience said, will the audience want to experience an Eloquent JavaScript course or not?
I think that's really interesting. I think it'll help. Especially, I don't think new developers should be going through eloquent JavaScript on their own and that be their solo education. And I think having an instructor paired with it, though, would be very, very beneficial, because I think sometimes people just get lost. The revisions it's just like, I think it's a really good, I don't think it's like a good beginner course without mentorship. If you provide that mentorship, I think it's really good. And first 6 chapters, if you could do the first 6 chapters, that is fantastic. I mean, like a lot of coding boot camps will go to like chapters 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then 5 and 6 are something you supplement down the road or right before you join the program. But I think that's interesting. But maybe you've seen different data. I also understand student behavior where like you give them the option to skip over it. They're going to skip over it. And that's really the problem. I think a lot of students, I mean, software engineers, even with like a year or 2 of experience, sometimes have a really hard time estimating their skills, where they are compared to other software engineers, where they should be, what they still have to supplement. It's a really hard skill to build up over time. And to expect brand new developers to be able to self-assess, which you're trusting them to do because it's probably still going to be optional, like that is, you're going to have a lot of people that just skip over it. So I don't think it's the lack of resources they have to prepare, which I think you will help more people, but I don't think it's a lack of resources. The resources are out there. It's the willingness to do it. It's the understanding how important it is to get those foundations down before you dive into a program, because it is going to help. Because like common feedback that I've heard from your program, it goes really fast, right? And so like a lot of people recommend really get your foundations down, and you'll really get tons of value out of this program for much cheaper than other coding boot camps. So I still feel like you're going to face the issue where people are skipping over it and just doing normal people behavior stuff. And it's kind of, I think it still should be on you to say, like, have that assessment. I don't think it should be some arbitrary assessment. I think it should make sense to integrate into the actual program that you're teaching, right? It's going to be custom for you. But I just see a lot of people skipping over that.
Yeah. We do have, we have an assessment. You have to pass.
Multiple choice.
Yeah, multiple choice, 85% success rate. But I mean, I hear you. You're fair in what you're describing. It's not necessarily. It's not how I think about it. I don't want to be the arbitrator of telling someone you're not doing it. And there's so many ways that someone could pass any assessment. Like if you really want to push it, you really have to have, maybe it's an in-person assessment then. Or maybe it's an assessment where, you have a special software in your machine and you're controlling the environment so that the person doesn't cheat. My mindset is more, I'm going to trust you that you're doing the right thing. It's for your future. We're telling you everything you should be doing, and we're going to ask you, did you do it? And we're going to offer you all the ways that you can do it. If you still say, yes, I did it, I'm going to take your word for it. Here's the opposite side of this. This is also what we want to avoid. And I'm going to reference a recent review that you did, where I think you had 3 graduates. One of them was a PhD student. Another one was a Stanford, did an internship at Stanford in a lab, I think. The third one had a more traditional path, and I think maybe all 3 or just 2 paid cash, full amount. And what I want to say is, this is not necessarily like those folks are going to pass every assessment you put in front of them. Those guys are going to, they're going to be accepted by that coding bootcamp. They'll do great in Nucamp as well. But Nucamp wasn't really created so that we only accept those type of profiles. Nucamp was really created so that ultimately, I think to your point, if you're going on your own online, chances are you're not going to stay committed. And I think that was something that was said in the review as well. You're not going to stay committed. You're not going to achieve your goal. You're going to go into tutorial hell. And really the value of Nucamp is the structure and the support. Ultimately, we've optimized our cost structure so that we could deliver great structure and great support and kind of eliminated all risks. related to, quitting your job, related to traveling, relating to taking a loan, etc. And so for that to really make sense, you don't want to create a huge barrier to entry and actually tell no to folks that will then go back to tutorial hell. So that's I think it's more of a philosophy. I don't disagree necessarily with your approach. It's not why we did Nucamp in the first place. It's not to say no at the beginning. It's to say, these are all the things you should be doing before joining. And if you say you've done it, we're going to trust you, and we're going to bring you to, the end of the other end of the tunnel, hopefully with all the skills that you need to get a job. Yeah.
I get your philosophy, and I think what you want Nucamp to be, I think it makes sense. But you're also, the words we're choosing matter, and you keep saying no, and I'm saying not yet. The words aren't no, the words are not yet. But I do get your philosophy, and I like this, what I'm recommending is really beneficial when I'm specifically considering placement rates in a shorter amount of time. And what you are offering, you're focused more on delivering education sooner to people that is structured, and you're not focused on that strict path of super high placement rates in a short amount of time. But it's basically accessible education to anyone that is willing to put the effort in, and you just assume they will, and if they don't, they drop out. Like you said, survival of the fittest. They drop out, then they drop out. That's it. Yeah. And so there are a lot of self-paced programs that don't have structure like that, where there are a lot of programs like that. And I can see, Nucamp's a bit of an upgrade. Of course, it's going to cost more, but something like Treehouse or something like that, I feel like people are probably getting a lot more mentorship at Nucamp, a lot more focus. And yeah, so I get what you're trying to do with Nucamp. I do. And I think we talked about it, but I still almost think it's a bad idea to call your program a coding bootcamp. I don't think it's necessarily a low bar, but it's not really focused on what a coding bootcamp traditionally is focused on. You're heavy on the education, and we've, I'm not going to leak a bunch of stuff, but we've dove into this conversation around what you truly vision Nucamp as. And you are someone that loves creating accessible education for people. And if people are asking for help, they're putting in the effort, you want to help them. It's not so much on what a traditional coding bootcamp tends to focus on.
Yeah, I think it's very fair. The terminology coding bootcamp, it was really well defined, 5 years ago, and maybe we don't fit 100%. I think it's fair. We don't. I think we don't fit, and we can fit as well. But it's not perfect. It's not a perfect glove. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know what the terminology will be though. I'm not sure how we will call ourselves, but or which industry we will be placed in. But
I appreciate you sharing your philosophy and helping me understand that more. It does, because I think people are going to judge your program based on comparing it to other more traditional coding boot camps that are purely sell hard with the placement rates, right? And I would argue that's unfair to you and your program. I think people are grading your coding boot camp from a badly designed rubric in that sense.
Could be. We try to fit there. To be clear, we do invest in job placement programs. We talked about job hunting. We had a conversation, and we actually made more investment in that space than 2 years ago when we first talked. So it's not something that we put on the side and don't think about. But it's true that the way we think about the coding bootcamp space and our admission criteria, which is very light, and our emphasis on trusting, but also letting our students go the route they want to go, too, and not being so worried about, graduation rate, job placement rate, kind of creates a behavior that's not necessarily aligned to what everybody else does in the coding bootcamp industry. The good and the bad, by the way, because there's a lot of bad stuff happening in that, graduation rate, job placement rate, which, by the way, is also a reason why I didn't want to play in that game. So, yeah.
That's true. You don't have that pressure because a lot of coding bootcamps feel that pressure and they see their placement rates going down and they do stuff to try to boost it up as much as possible. And some of that stuff that is not very ethical, especially the data they present. Okay. Do you have up to 15 more minutes? Or do you get a hard cut off?
No. No. I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. I'm hitting you with kind of just, a few hard-hitting questions. So, is there any... Well, I was going to ask, before I ask my last one, is there anything you kind of just wanted to touch on thinking about the previous review, or you fine with the questions I'm giving you?
Let me look at the list.
Okay.
Oh, there was a comment on improving the video quality. It's actually something we started to do. Our first curriculum producer named Mine was fantastic. But she actually learned the job as she joined Nucamp 5 years ago. So the very first video she created was not the same quality as the last video she created 5 years later. And over time, we're going back to the curriculum and we're redoing those videos. So that's in progress. You may still actually find old videos, but it's going to be less and less over time. So that's good. We changed. There was a question on the bootcamp sequence. So we have something called the Complete Software Engineering Bootcamp path, which is not a bootcamp in itself. It's very much us saying, hey, if you were to take everything we have to offer, because they do make sense in a sequence, this is a sequence you should take. And we used to have web dev fundamentals, then backend with Python, then full stack, which kind of makes sense, but not so much. It was just because we didn't have so much emphasis on JavaScript in the full stack bootcamp that we were teaching the fundamentals of programming with Python. So it was actually kind of in reverse. But now that we've actually implemented JavaScript heavily in JavaScript, we have a more natural path, I will say, for the complete software engineering, which is very much web development fundamentals, then full stack, then backend with Python, and then job hunting. So that's also something that we were able to do with this update.
Okay.
Yeah, that was pretty. Oh, and I don't know if you want to talk about the Google Cloud integration stuff. I think people had questions around that. Maybe very quickly to explain. So we have a partnership with Google. They're funding us for a scholarship. They're not funding us for the content to be integrated with our content, with our curriculum, but they're funding the scholarship. And in return, we want to bring their content as well. The content they had at first was not a perfect match. And so we actually, in that process, we gave them feedback. And actually the Google team recreated a bunch of labs. Not for us, but, pretty much receiving the feedback that the labs they had were not beginner friendly enough and too much from a DevOps standpoint, not enough from a developer standpoint. And so we're going to be able to swap the old labs with the new labs pretty shortly. So there's going to be a much better integration of the Google Labs into our curriculum pretty soon. Yeah, so that was kind of what I had in my list.
I love how quick you are to act on the feedback. That's one thing I don't see in a lot of coding boot camps.
So I don't have much to compare. I don't know how the other coding bootcamps are doing it. I can tell you that we capture weekly feedback from students, both on the quality of the instructor and the content itself. We capture feedback at the end of the bootcamp, and we're looking at it every week, pretty much. So, and it's easy in a sense that most of the time the students' feedback is consistent, right? So when something is not right, we're going to know pretty fast, and we're gonna know what to do, when to act. The hardest part, especially when you think about content, it's really investing the resources, the time to actually make changes to content. That's the thing. And I don't know, there's a lot of feedback from students saying, "Oh, that content is too old," and maybe it's a year old. I think that, and maybe just in our case, but I think it's true for every coding bootcamp. There's a lot that goes into updating content, and it's not just video production. It's it's the script, and very often that content is connected to what comes before, what comes after, and it's it's an investment, and it's a time sink as well for the team. So it's not straightforward, but just like we did with JavaScript, we want to do it. I think the feedback that's easier to act on is, code of conduct type of feedback. And I think you had a student or a graduate comment on that. And we do have a code of conduct process. And, anytime someone has something to say, we investigate, we hear both parties, and we take action. But yeah, I'm pretty proud of the team that we have that really looks after that. And we have an instructor person that looks after the instructor interest. We have a student person who looks after the student's interest. Then we have a manager that kind of balances both. And then you have me that's like, okay, what are we going to do now? But yeah, we have a great team.
I really like that. So you basically have two kind of coaches looking out for each side. That's actually interesting. So I think, some of the feedback I remember feedback that I think is really important to bring up in your full stack, your last 2 weeks. It sounds like your last 2 weeks with the job, career stuff, it just sucks. But I would argue, I really think they were just missing the ball on you actually offer the job hunting. And I remember you talking about that more, and that sounds like a lot more depth.
So when students enroll in any bootcamp that's not the 4 weeks bootcamp, they have access to our free quote unquote career services. That's the thing that was not enough before we had the job hunting bootcamp, but it's still there. And so there's a gate to that one. The gate is we actually do care about your job placement information. And so we ask you to fill a survey. If you don't fill that survey at the end of the graduation party, which we do every 5 weeks, you're not going to get anything. And so if you're missing that survey, if you don't fill it, you're not going to be invited to everything else, which would be bad. And trust me, we ping you plenty of times to fill that survey. So don't answer that survey. Super important, because then you get to, you're assigned a career coach, and you can schedule 30 minutes conversation with that coach. You have access to the 4-week job hunting bootcamp content. And I think there was confusion around that. So you can go into the job hunting bootcamp content for free. What you don't have is the practice with the instructor that you will get if you were to enroll in job hunting bootcamp. And that's something we wanted to do. We didn't want to force our students into yet another bootcamp to have access to the material. But to have access to an actual instructor that teaches you for over 4 weeks and does, whiteboard interviews, data structure and algorithm interviews with you, that you will have to pay for, and it's an additional 4 weeks and an additional $450 investment. But I think that's the thing that people, our graduates, don't necessarily see clearly, and that's also on us to make sure that it's clearer. Is that you have access to the content, but not the Saturday workshops, the 4 hours workshops, if you don't pay for the job hunting bootcamp in addition. Otherwise, you have plenty of stuff already. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I think you should highlight that more, because it's like it's the last phase of Nucamp. Yeah. And I feel like there's actually real substance in the job hunting portion that can really, and it would just help with your, reviews and stuff like that. Do you feel like you probably should market that more?
Yes, and I thought we did until we hear people saying, being confused. That's one thing we didn't necessarily see in the surveys, to be honest. I think what's happening is our graduates, when you get to graduation, you've done a lot and you're kind of exhausted. And I think we have to fight that exhaustion to kind of impress upon them that, hey, there's that thing as well that you have to worry about and care about. Or maybe we have to do it earlier. Maybe we have to do it when they're just starting. But I think right now we're making our push to the career services, the career coach, the answering the survey during the graduation period. And as we're talking, I'm like, well, maybe that's the wrong time to do that, because there's so much that's going on in their head already, and there's exhaustion coming in, and maybe they're not receptive to that at that point in time. They just want to relax a little bit and enjoy the certificate or something,
They'll probably be receptive once they're struggling in the job search too. It could always be like introducing it a month down the road.
Oh, and you're right. Yeah, actually, that's a good one, because it is still available. Like the free career services trigger when you're answering the survey. So you can answer the survey the day of graduation, or you can answer the survey 2 months later, and everything then will be available to you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I like hearing about this. I like hearing the extra context. I obviously don't always get to hear about it when I just listen to students, because sometimes they don't even have the extra context. So I feel like I answered I asked all the questions I wanted to. I really appreciate you hopping on. I'm glad you did DM me. We could have this conversation. I wish I've had some staff. See, the thing is, I've had some staff that have reached out, but it's when they reach out, it feels like it's just marketing. They don't want to have a real conversation. They just want, they only want to come on and like correct things that they feel should have a better perception in the public eye. It's like, no, I'm going to challenge you, and I'll warn them, and then they don't respond. So, and I mean, you're the only one that's actually willing to, you're one of the few people that are willing to actually come on and have a real conversation. You understand that your program isn't perfect, and that showcases there's a positive to that. You constantly iterate. You constantly take feedback seriously. You've built a giant system in place. I had no idea you had that many instructors. And like you take all of this very seriously. And I think it stems from your philosophy of just like the education you truly want to bring to people. You don't strike me as a coding bootcamp that's just trying to take money out of people's pockets. Like that's not why you did this. And I believe that. When you say that, the other programs that say that, I think some of them are full of shit. But like when you say it, I truly do believe it. So that's why I do enjoy these conversations.
Well, thank you for saying all that, Don. Really appreciate. And I think you should. Yeah, I mean, you're attracting that type of feedback and that type of conversation. The way you've structured your channel as well. So yeah,
cool. I hope so. Thank you. All right, before we wrap up, stick around just for like an extra minute afterwards. But if you want to share anything, you kind of advertise like some of the iterations you're making on your program. But, if people want to reach out, interested in Nucamp, anything like that, how could they reach you?
Yeah, I mean, our website is www.nucamp.co. If you want to talk to me directly, feel free to do so. My email is ludo@nucamp.co. So I'll be there as well. We're doing a ton of stuff. I'm really curious to hear the audience on, that idea of having a free course out there. I'll mention something else, maybe to pique interest regarding that course. And you and I have had some conversation around it. It may or may not be that course could or could not be generated by AI. To what extent, I won't share too much. But we're working on something special that will allow us to, again, address that problem of how costly and how slow it can be to produce content. And so that course for us is going to be, okay, is it worth producing free courses? But how satisfied are students when and how much do they see it? Like, how obvious is it that course may or may not have been generated by AI? So that's another thing that we'll want to try.
That is interesting. I've thought about that myself. That's interesting. I'll have to touch base with you and see how that goes.
Yeah, we will.
Okay.
Offline, there's a ton of stuff. Like we cannot talk too much about it just yet, but it's pretty exciting, and yeah, I'm looking forward to see what students have to say about it.
Okay. That sounds good. All right. Well, anyways, let us know what you thought. Like I said, a lot of staff members aren't really willing to, or CEOs especially aren't willing to come on and have a real conversation. They just want to come on and sell their programs, which is why I pretty much refuse most people that request it. But yeah, seriously, Ludo, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Don. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, everyone.